Get ready for the Very Visible Business Podcast with David Avrin. Each week featuring a candid and raucous conversation with some of the most innovative, outspoken, and entrepreneurial business minds in the world today. This is the Very Visible Business Podcast. And here's David Avrin.
And welcome to the Very Visible Business Podcast. My name is David Avrin. I'm thrilled that you're here. And if you've had a chance to listen to some of the other podcasts as well, I have the great fortune of interviewing some phenomenal guests and friends. And if you look at the page here, whether you're on C-Suite Radio, whether you're on iTunes as well, you'll see some familiar names, maybe some less familiar names. But part of my job is to bring to you some brilliant voices, some brilliant colleagues to share wisdom about business. How do we grow our businesses? What's the current thinking? What's happening in the world of disruption? And today is a real treat for me because I have my friend, my colleague, Shep Hyken, former president of the National Speakers Association, unbelievable speaker with a really interesting background. We'll talk about that as well. But quick introduction, and then we'll say hi to him officially. Some of you are listening, some of you are watching the video version of this podcast as well. But Shep Hyken is the Chief Amazement Officer at Shepherd Presentations, an award-winning keynote speaker, New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author. He's one of the leading experts in the field of customer service and experience. He works with companies who want to build loyal relationships with their customers and employees. That is brief. It does not do justice to the work that he has done. And I will tell you, in the 20 years or so that I've been involved with the with my speaker colleagues through the National Speaker Association and others, I've watched other people not necessarily grow. I think I'm the one that's sort of grown in the industry, but I've watched people who are really at the peak of not only speaking as a craft, but in terms of content and professionalism. And I've probably watched 80 to 90% of the people start with passion, have a measure of success, maybe get some gigs, move on to a real job, and sort of weed themselves out. But I've watched Shep grow, and there's just a class about him that I just so appreciate. He is the pinnacle of even the category where I talk about customer experience. I bow in reverence to my colleague, Shep Hyken. So there is my fawning introduction. Shep, thanks and welcome to the Very Visible Business Podcast.
Wow. Well, thank you very, very much for making your comments very visible. Wow.
Yes.
My mom I'm going to make sure she listens to this introduction, and I'm going to actually record just the introduction, and then I'm going to play it over and over for my wife and kids.
Yeah,
they get it.
As they roll their eyes and go, yeah, whatever, Dad.
Okay, whatever. Hey, you said something. I just want to make a comment. You said, people, watch people at the peak of their careers. I love being at the peak of my career this year, and next year, I hope I set another peak.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's part of it, is we never should settle for what we're doing now. Is somebody once said, recently I heard him say it, he says, you don't want to be good. You want to be better. You're constantly trying to get better. So it's not a destination. Good is a destination. The peak is a destination. Constantly try to just get better.
Well, I've loved watching you, the content grow and mature. And it's not just because you've gotten smarter. We all get smarter. But I think your material, and I want to talk, before I talk about your history and how you grew up, we'll do that a little bit later. I think is some of the most relevant, actionable content that's being delivered today, whether it's on stage, through your books. Maybe some people know The Cult of the Customer, The Amazement Revolution, and his newest book, there's other books in there as well, but the newest book, The Convenience Revolution, I think is so current. It's so relevant and so actionable. There's a lot of people who have sort of timeless wisdom. Yours isn't timeless wisdom. I think it's very, very timely.
Well, thank you. And you know what's interesting? If you go back 10 years, it's just as timely, and hopefully 10 years from now, it'll still be timely.
Right.
Because people, when they read something, and whether it's my books or anybody else's books, your books, or they hear something from you, where they are in their careers, where they are with their businesses, at that moment, it needs to be timely.
Right.
So, but you're right. I mean, I looked at something that's happening right now, and while the convenience revolution has been going on for literally almost a century at this point. Actually, if you go back to the origination of the first convenience store of all time, was 500 something AD, when Justinian the Great declared at every major intersection, I guess where the chariots will cross over during the Justinian Empire, the Byzantine Empire, excuse me. He said, there will be a store, his exact words, according to Wikipedia anyway, is there will be a store that sells life's necessities for the convenience of the citizens.
A Renaissance man.
That's how far my research goes. But really, today, you look at the best companies in the world and who you love doing business with and who the disruptors are.
Right.
And it's not that they've come out with a revolutionary product. It's that they've come out with a better way to deliver that product, a better experience for the customer. And that's a convenient experience.
Well, absolutely. Well, so talk to me about, I talk about some of this as well. I'm always careful as I look at who are the giants of our industry and making sure that what I'm doing is relevant and differentiated in some way. But I've watched you make a really successful, I wouldn't even call it a shift, and almost an enhancement of sort of the traditional mindset of customer service, not being simplistic, but customer service to this shift towards customer experience. Others have merely just relabeled what they've done. You have a really in-depth knowledge and perspective and message on what that experience needs to look like today and how it differs from yesteryear. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, I mean, when I started out many, many years ago, I started out talking about general customer service, the interaction that employees have with their customers, and then also what happens internally for your internal customers as well. But what's interesting about all of this is as this concept of experience came about, for the longest time, customer experience was just another word for customer service.
Right. They just put the label on their old stuff and say, it's like marketing people say, now I'm a branding expert.
Right.
With no new content. It's just something new.
And by the way, service and experience is part of marketing and branding. It all kind of
course, absolutely. It's all part of our delivery system. But where did that mind shift happen? And what are some of the key elements that really typify the experience over mere service?
Sure. And what happened is smart companies started recognizing that experience is bigger than just the interaction between two people. Sure. It can be, and by the way, I say two people, it could be the interaction you might have with a website, which is experience. But keep in mind, the website was built by a person to be used by a person. So it's kind of people doing business with people just in a digital way. But then, like Steve Jobs and Apple, you get the box that you're, back then, what was it was just a music machine.
The iPod.
The iPod, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, just the box is crazy cool. And then, I mean, that's just part of the experience. And then as you journey map a typical customer's experience, many of the interactions they have are with people, but some aren't. Now, how did I transition into that? Call it dumb luck, if you will. But what happens is I read a ferocious amount of material every single day, every single week. I just wrote an article that'll come out by the end of the year that's about the top 10 customers or top 10 business books to read, some of which are customer service and experience. And I realized this year I probably read about 40 books and dozens of others I looked at. And I don't know why people send me books every single day. I receive books in the mail. And I love the gift. Please, people who send books, don't stop sending them, because I look at them. And if you catch my interest, I read the book from cover to cover. I promote it. And anyway, I read these books. I read 5 to 10 articles a day because we have Google alerts that, will pop up all these different articles.
Absolutely.
And that just makes you smarter. And that's it.
I was talking to Joe Calloway a little bit earlier, mutual friend, another brilliant author.
I love Joe.
Another as well. I was telling him that the first time I saw him, I was at a National Speaker Association meeting 20 years ago, sat in the consultants meeting for the consultants group. And he talked about that his job is to be the most informed person in the room, whether he's sitting on an advisory board or whether, and he talked about reading like 20 newspapers a day, which sort of dates it that we were reading newspapers. But content is so prolific, it's so available that there's almost no excuse to not be up on what's happening, what's different. What has been your greatest learning in terms of the expectations of that experience? One of the things I talk about is sort of that significant change over the last 11 years since the iPhone came out, right? Our our expectation in terms of expediency and immediacy and being able to customize the things and buy what we want when we want, whether we're yelling at Alexa across the room to buy whatever. How much different is it today compared to what you would have even seen 20 years ago? Because I think that the message is needed now. I don't know that how relevant it would have been 20 years ago.
So let's, I'm going to share something. Somebody said, what's changed in customer service or experience in the last 10 years? I said, well, I'm going to tell you, nothing has changed. As a matter of fact, you can go back 50 years. Nothing has changed. A customer comes to you with a question or a problem. They want it resolved to their satisfaction. Ideally, when they're done with the interaction, they go away happy. That has not changed. What's happened is from the moment that customer has that problem to the moment they walk away happy. In the middle, now, that has changed. And that's just the method in which we approach and communicate and connect with and interact with our customers. And that goes from everything which used to be traditionally walking into somewhere for service or picking up the phone and calling someone to being able to email, to use social channels like Twitter and Facebook and Messenger, and to go on a website and be able to take control of it and do it myself. You know, there's some great videos or some great how-to answers on certain websites where I know I don't have to waste my time on hold. I just go straight to the website, type in my question, boom, I get it. And so the method in which we deliver the information that's going to make a customer happy, that has actually changed. But at the end of the day, really nothing has changed as far as what you want the outcome to be.
Right. But let me ask you this. Don't you think that much of the change in terms of that process in between of how it's delivered, don't you think a lot of that is driven by the expectations of the consumer?
Well, the expectations change, and they change for two reasons. The biggest reason, and every year I will make my number one prediction every year for the last, I don't know how many years, is your customer's smarter than last year. Okay.
Right.
And the reason is because great companies are teaching them what great service and experience is. I mean, Amazon teaches us like instant gratification practically. As soon as we place the order, boom, an email shows up. Your order has been placed. A few hours later, your order's been shipped. You know, here's the tracking information. By the way, next day, your order has been received. I know, I just got it 6 seconds ago.
Right. But didn't we used to, didn't we used to compare it against other competitors? Now we just compare it against the experience against the best in the industries.
Right. And that's like so many times my opening line in my speech today is that we're no longer compared to the direct competitor. We are compared to the best service. And that could be a company like Amazon, or it could be their favorite restaurant where the service is so friendly, or the guy that just sold us a $25 pair of running shoes. He was so knowledgeable and helpful, and he found these shoes that were half price. Why can't everybody be as good as this one?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was, and of course this is worldwide. 2 weeks ago, I was in Dubai sitting in the back of an Uber with a colleague that I was with. And he asked me that specific question. He says, how do you think Amazon, I mean, he wasn't talking Alibaba or whatever else. And he says, how do you think Amazon has changed? And I said, well, the easy answer, of course, is just that there's an expectation that we can get what we want. But I think the real impact has been, we gauge all of our experiences about, well, if they can do it that fast, then you should as well.
Yep. They're training us.
Yeah. And it's really driven. My kids, they don't hearken back to a different time. This has always been their world. They, we were young, we would, if we didn't know how to spell a word, we'd say, Mom, how do you spell whatever? And what would she say?
Look it up in the dictionary.
Look it up in the dictionary. Exactly right. And I do it with audiences, and they parrot that back. But the reality is now they ask Alexa. They don't have to go to the library. They don't. And
By the way, every time you mention her name,
she is mine as well.
My background.
Mine's right there as well. And every time the commercials do that. But see, here's the other thing. I mean, Alexa is a perfect example. Is that the expectation of immediate answers? She can translate a word. She can set a timer. She can do all those things. I have 7 Alexas around my house. I mean, literally anybody who has a question, it's in every room. I do a lot of work with hotel and hospitality. I just got back with Cancun. Within a year or two, there's going to be a personal device in every single room, because that's going to be part of the expectation of how do we get what we want? How do we ask a question? It's crazy in terms of how, because I would submit that I think so much is driven because there is this expectation in terms of instant answers, gratification, access. And I think customers the companies are waking up to this more and more every day.
So you mentioned your kids, and I think some of this is really relevant. When you first ordered a pizza to be delivered, my guess is you were probably in college, maybe
Probably high school or college. Sure.
High school or college. And what did you do? You picked up the phone and you called.
Right.
Well, and who did you call? Domino's. I remember getting my first Domino's pizza. I loved it. And by the way, I started eating at Domino's. It started, this is a treat, once a week. And it started when I was in college. It turned into once a night. And you should have seen what I looked like at the end of that semester. Anyway, I love Domino's. Well, today there's at least 10 different ways you can order the pizza other than picking up the telephone. And here's what's cool. My generation, your generation, we're used to picking up the phone, and that's totally fine. We may even want to pick up the phone because, even though we use all these other tools, oftentimes because our entire lives we picked up the phone, it's like, what's the phone number for Domino's? So ordering a pizza, pick up the phone. Then there's this next generation. It's a millennial generation. It's a generation X, Y, whatever. These people, they did pick up the phone, and they also were more immersed in technology than we were. So they're willing to pick up the phone, but they'd rather use another way. And that's what's happening today. Then there's a new generation coming right on the heels of the millennials. I believe they're calling it Generation Z, maybe.
Right.
But that generation just doesn't pick up the phone, period.
Right.
Yeah.
This is my 15-year-old son. But it's going to another level, isn't it? It's not just that they want to do a different way. Their expectation year over year is that not only can they do it online, but now they can do it with one click. Mm-hmm. Now they can do it by just saying it to Alexa or Google or anybody else.
And they're used to it. It's what they grew up with. I still think my cell phone's really cool, my mobile phone. it's really crazy cool. Right. And my kid says, it's just a mobile phone. I go, yeah, but you don't understand.
Right. And you're right. They don't. Mm-hmm. They don't. They don't know the panic of trying to find a quarter because we had to make a phone call, or trying to find a payphone or something else. There was a time, you look at you and I, we travel pretty extensively, and it wasn't even until probably 3 years ago that they finally took out the final payphones from the airport.
I know. I was in Las Vegas last year for a conference, and there was a payphone there, and I took a picture and I Instagrammed it. What's this? And then I was in you dropped Dubai, so I'll drop where I was last week. I was in Cuba, and
nice little geographic name dropping for our audiences there.
Right, and there was an old payphone there that, by the way, is being used on a regular basis. Sure. And then next to it, the phone man was working on I guess it might have been the building. I opened up. I had to take a picture. I've never seen so many wires in my entire life. This is what it looked like in the 50s.
Right.
It's amazing.
But talk about our expectations and how those are changing, and how you're helping companies equip themselves from a mindset perspective, from an internal process and delivery perspective. How are you helping them make that shift for those who are on the cusp, to the ones who not only will get it, but will be well prepared 2 years from now, 3 years from now, with how people want to buy?
Right. So let's go through a 6-step process. I call them 6 simple steps, and this is what every company has to do to get customer focused. And I'll go through them really, really quick.
No, you're fine. Listen, our audience loves meat and potatoes. Give us something.
Right. So here's some good meat then. Number one, and by the way, what we're trying to do is we recognize, even if we're good at it already, in order to sustain it, it needs to be part of your culture. And even if it's part of your culture already, I hopefully will share with you something today that says, that's a little piece we need to add in. So first and foremost, leadership has to define what the customer experience vision is, customer service, customer experience. And that is, in my mind, it needs to be short, quick, and to the point. One sentence is as long as it gets, because everybody can remember one sentence. And my favorite is the Ritz-Carlton's credo. I call them mantras. Mantras are less, sometimes they're just a few words, but the credo of the Ritz is, we're ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. So you go to work there, you know what it's about. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to be trained to do. And whether you're working in the back office as an auditor, or you're working on the front line, at the front desk, or you're a housekeeper, you'll be trained differently, but you'll understand what this means. Number two, and again, I can elaborate on many of these.
Sure.
It just to you, like our company, it's 3 words: always be amazing. And we are always amazing to our employees, to our clients, and we teach our clients for them to be amazing to their clients and customers or whatever they want to call them. So that's a quick little. By the way, I have a favorite one. One of my favorites, not my favorite, because the Ritz-Carlton's truly my favorite. But one of my most fun ones to share is there's a company called Symbiosis in Nashville, Tennessee. I hope I got the pronunciation of their name right. I love theirs. It basically goes like this: we love our customers so much that when we kiss them, their lips bleed.
That's awesome.
And that, when you have a statement like that, people, and by the way, it's not a theme. It's not something that goes away after a year. It goes right next to your vision and values. So you've got to work hard to come up with this. I mean, it can change after a number of years, but you don't want to get into this theme of the month kind of thing. So once you've defined it, now you have to communicate it. That's step 2. And the way you do that is, typical communication. It's everywhere. Your leadership shares it. And by the way, I don't care if you're a company of 1, 2, or 3 people. If you're one person, then this is for you. If you're a company that has tens of thousands of employees, great. Difference, by the way, between tens of thousands and 10 is that it's easier to change a culture of 10 than it is to change a culture of thousands, if not. One guy said to me, "How long is this going to take? I have 35,000 employees." I said, 4 to 6 years. When do you want to sign the contract? And he smiled, and he did. Anyway, that's another story.
So number 1, the short, sweet vision. Number 2.
Number 2. Make sure everybody knows it. It's everywhere. It's seen. It's constantly reinforced. Number 3, you train, and you train everybody. Even people that aren't on the front line dealing directly with customers, they need to understand their role, and they're just trained differently. Somebody who's on the front line may get true customer service or sales training or communication training. Somebody in the warehouse gets a different type of training, but they do need to be trained to understand.
And before you go on, I'm going to stop on that one for a second, because I agree. I think that it's so important, and especially everybody understanding what cog they are in the wheel of how to make this happen. And I saw this years ago with a lot of colleagues of ours who talked about employee engagement and how do you make people feel important, and that here's your role and what we do. But I think it's so much more so now. I mean, you look at like your primary bank branch, right, is your phone.
Yep.
Right? So you can talk all you want about engaging people, knowing them by name, looking them in the eye. It has nothing to do with when you're dealing with technology. Well, the technology people and the delivery people and the HR people who are bringing in the right people, everybody has to be indoctrinated is probably the wrong word, but trained to understand.
Right. It's a philosophy. It's not a department.
And everybody has a role. So I'm all in on that one. I think very, very important.
Well, think about this. Years ago, a book, actually, and I read an article in the early 1980s, back when I had hair, that said, Jan Carlson wrote about the moment of truth. Whenever a customer comes into contact with any aspect of a business, they form an impression. Now, he ran an airline, so he's talking about passengers as his customers, and most of the interaction is done people to people. But then he would go into an airplane hangar, and every city they had a presence, and he'd preach this moments of truth concept, and he said, "Hey, you guys over in the baggage handling department, you're really important. If I live in St. Louis, and if I'm coming to visit you in Colorado and I check my bag, I see it go down that conveyor belt. I land in Denver, 2.5 hours later, and there's my bag. 20 people probably touched my bag. None of them saw me. None of them interacted with me. But if one of them had made a mistake, I'm going to have that moment of misery at the end of the trip when my bag doesn't show up." So these people, they need to understand they have an incredible impact on the customer's experience, even if they never, ever see or talk to a customer.
Yep, agree fully. So number 3 is train. Number 4?
Yep. Number 4 is that leadership needs to actually be the role model. A manager, a leader, they need to dedicate themselves to making sure that they are the showcase. And, our friend Mark Sanborn says, when it comes to great service, leadership, you don't need a title to be a leader. When it comes to great service, you want to be that person that everybody says, "Wow, I really like what they're doing. I'm going to try to do more of that." But let's talk about a leader. I love to use Walt Disney as an example. As he walked through the theme park back when he was alive, people would say, "Oh, there's Mr. Disney. Wow, that's Walt Disney." And people were amazed at this man. And as he walked through the park, he knew everybody was watching, especially his employees who they called cast members.
Right.
And he saw a piece of paper on the ground, and he reached down, he picked it up, and he threw it away. And later on, he explained, he called that stooping to excellence. He said, if you walked by that paper, he gave permission for everyone else to walk by it. But by stooping down, picking it up, and throwing it away, he role modeled what he expected everybody to do. He called it stooping to excellence. And I call that number 4, be the role model.
Yeah,
and it's so important. You can't treat people or showcase one way and expect them to treat somebody the other way.
Well, and I think even to another level, I think not only is it modeling the kinds of behavior, we know that as parents, it's the same thing. You can't tell your kids, teaching them to drive when you're doing the things that you're telling them not to do. But I think it's also looking for opportunities to showcase that. I mean, isn't it? I mean, there's the whole MBWA, was that management by walking around. Right, by walking around.
Yep.
But I think it's more than that. It's I think some of the best leaders are looking for opportunities to be present, to be visible, manifesting the things that they talk about. And it's not an inadvertent, let's see if we can, somebody happened to notice that. I like them creating scenarios where they're going to be there. They're doing a grand opening. That person is there. That person is the one who is, you see this with Marcus Lemonis, right? On the Prophet. And he'll roll up his sleeves and he gets
into it all.
Yeah, absolutely. I read an article a couple of days ago that at an elementary school in Texas or somewhere else, there was a woman who was the principal of the school. Their janitor, their whatever
custodial engineer.
There you go, the politically correct term, had been out for a couple of days. She'd had an illness and she'd been working at the school. And the principal put on rubber gloves and was washing toilets and cleaning toilets, saying, needed to be done. I'm not too good for this. That visibility among her team that says, I'm willing to do what you're willing to do, I think is so powerful.
Yep. And so that's being the role model, and it is extremely powerful. Number 5 is you defend the culture. You defend what you're trying to achieve. And that means if you see a person, a group of people, a department, if it's a larger company, it could be a whole region or, some type of subsidiary. If they're out of alignment with what you are wanting to achieve with that customer service vision we talked about, number 1, they need to be brought back in. I once asked an executive CEO what his most important job was, major company, and he says, I defend the culture. We created it. I mean, there's lots of deals that are made. He's got people that are smart that run the numbers, but he defends the culture, which is pretty cool.
Do you think that in some cases, and I think of examples of organizations where the culture is palpable, it permeates the organization, the Disneys, Chick-fil-A is one of those as well. And I know there's some controversy about Chick-fil-A, but how it manifests itself on the store level. There's a bar. We go through the drive-through, and my kids are like, they're so nice. And I'm like, they are nice.
Even in the drive-through, they're so nice. It's amazing.
Yeah, they hire for nice. They train for nice. And I think it becomes, in many cases, a catalyst for conformity, in that it's so clear where the culture is that those who fall outside are either brought back in by the cultural norms, by the masses within the organ, or they're kicked out.
Right. And so they have to be.
It's not just leadership. One of my favorite examples, I should show this. I should show a clip or something. Do you remember in the movie Big?
I love Big.
I love Big too. When Tom Hanks becomes the older version, he goes and gets a job and he sits down next to John Lovitz, the actor, right? And he's working away and typing away, and John Lovitz goes, hey, slow it down, right? Because it's going to make the rest of us look bad. that culture, right,
forcing mediocrity upon people.
Right. It's like, don't, because then all of the rest of us have to raise our game as well. I think that defending the culture, is a wonderful example, and best manifest when it's defended by the rank and file.
Right.
You think?
So I have a friend of mine, I just interviewed him for a show that I do, and he has a rock star culture. He wins workplace awards every single year. And I said, so what's the secret? I mean, do I want to be hired by you? I mean, is it that cool? He goes, first of all, we're an elite group of people, not elite from the standpoint of money. No, but we're elite within what we do. He says, I get the best people, the hardest working, the ones that are most dedicated. I go, well, how do you do that? He says, well, I pay them well, but I create an environment that they want to come to work. And by the way, it's 7:00 at night when you walk through our offices, a lot of people are still there. Why? Because it's not about what time do I get off work. It's like, when do I get my obligation finished? That's what I'm most proud of. But he said something, and it's like the Navy SEAL type of thinking. He said, people are motivated sometimes by not letting their team members down more than they are than their personal motivation. So
we see that a lot in sports, youth sports as well, especially team sports. And that was some of the lessons for those, and we're both fathers as well, but as my kids play competitive sports, and that was my greatest lesson for them, was when you're sick, when you're not feeling well, you can't let them down.
Right.
And this isn't an individual sport. It's not showing up. You show up, you've let them down. And I think, how do you in the teaching that you do through your speaking and consulting, how do you help them inculcate that mindset within an organization?
Sure. And by the way, number 5 being defending the culture.
Right.
This is one of the keys to doing it, is that you have to keep it in front of them all the time. You have to constantly reinforce. Training isn't something you did. It's something you do. It's ongoing. And that doesn't mean you have to take people out for a half a day every 2 weeks. No, you could say, you know what, we put you through some basic training. We spent a good amount of time on customer service / experience training. Now what we're going to do is we're going to reinforce it. 5 minutes, 7 minutes, every week or 2 weeks, we're going to make it part of our weekly meeting. All you need to do is constantly remind them. So once it's set and it's moving in the right direction, and everybody seems to be going in alignment, don't take it for granted. Constantly, be pushing it, reinforcing it, showcasing examples. Here's an exercise that we suggest our clients do. It's the number 1 culture-changing exercise, and it's this. Take an index card. I'm looking around. I have, there's some across the desk there. And just simply write down an example of when you've created a positive experience for either an outside customer or a colleague that you work with. In other words, I'm asking you, when are you being nice to the people?
Sure.
It's pretty simple. And it could be as simple as, I returned a phone call quickly. They were impressed. Okay. I could do something above and beyond. Oh my gosh, there was a catastrophe in the middle of the night. I got a phone call. I rushed into the office. I took care of it. That's the above and beyond, and everything in between. And we ask that our employees do this once a week. And that seems like a lot, but a lot of it is going to be shared, because the manager will say, oh, here's a great example from David this week. Here's another one from Shep. So 3 or 4 get shared, and you run through your group if you're in a department, and everybody contributes. But the manager will always pat the employee on the back, figuratively, if you will.
Sure.
Don't want to get into HR issues here, but just let them know, hey, this is a good one. And they'll praise them, or they'll say, oh, this is awesome. Do you mind if I share it? Or, hey, I have another idea that could make this even better the next time. And it's constant reinforcement that they're doing the right thing.
Do you find that with that exercise, when they create that expectation of this once a week check-in, that they're not only looking for examples because they know they're going to get called on to share it, but looking for opportunities to do something more so that they have something to talk about?
So what happens is, if you ask people to do this and you tell them it's due next Friday at noon, many of them will wait till 5 minutes before 12 o'clock to do it. And by the way, it takes 3 minutes to do, but when you go, okay, now what did I do this week? Now that's brain pain. What'll happen is they'll start to say on Tuesday, oh, this is a great example. I'm going to write this one down. And they take 2 minutes and they do it. Now they're done with the exercise. But what's happened is we've just made them aware. Service awareness is where it begins. And I think that's a huge part of it. So,
well, the other thing is when you get other people who are sharing great examples, they don't want to have lame examples, as my kids are. Here's the analogy that I draw. And you and I, we're both very intentional parents. I've got 1 kid still left at home, and my daughters are off.
Intentionally?
But yes, they are. I got a daughter who's producing in Hollywood. I got one in college, and but yeah, couldn't be more proud. But I remember, and I learned this from a psychologist friend or something some years back. Maybe it was something I read. Would you ask your kids, what we normally ask them, say, how was your day? Fine. What'd you do? Nothing, right? You get those 1-word answers. But to change the question, which was, what was your favorite thing that happened in school today? And they would come back, and for the first, a couple of days, I don't know, recess, or I don't know, whatever. They got to the point where they knew they were going to be asked the question. So they started looking for things and changing that mindset, looking for the positive thing. They didn't say, tell me about you. tell me the best thing that happened today. And they can focus on one thing. I think there's such a great parallel to what you're talking about, is not only are they looking for things to talk about, they jot them down, but I think looking for opportunities to do something so they have something good to share. And doing it in a public forum, as you talked about, almost shames those who have really bad examples. Really,
it raises the bar for everyone.
I love it.
Yep.
I love it. Okay. What was our number 6?
Number 6 is real simple. When it's working, celebrate. Let people know they've done a great job. And you don't have to have a crazy wild party, but you need to let people know. And celebration might be, well, my friend Ron, who I interviewed, his idea of celebration is if they hit a certain level, the entire company goes on a trip to Cancun. Not just the department, the entire company.
Not just the winners, but everybody.
Not just everybody's a winner. And I love that concept where, the rising tide floats all boats, not just the department that made it happen, because everybody has a piece of it. So you define it, you communicate it, you train to it, you role model it, you defend it, and then you celebrate it.
Love it. Tell me, Shep, how are you working with companies today? If somebody wanted to get in touch with you and wanted to work with you, in what capacity are you offering your service?
Sure. There's several different ways that companies work with us, clients work with us. Number one, they hire me as a speaker, which is what you and I have been doing for years and years. Sure. Number two, I have trainers that now go out and have been for a number of years delivering my content in a deeper dive format. They'll do multi-day, we'll put together, 2 and 3 year projects with clients. And then the third, kind of probably most exciting way is, I think it's the future. It's online. How can we scale what we do? I call it's like Shep on demand. I'm with you 24/7 if you've got an internet connection. And I've got multiple courses, and now we're translating them into other languages so that some of our international clients can take advantage of it. So it's pretty exciting. Plus, we all write our books and our articles, and that's part of my work too.
Outstanding. Okay, here's the lightning round. Okay. I always do with some having to do with work, some not. Quick questions, quick answers. What was your first stage performance?
First stage performance, 12 years old. I'm a birthday party magician in front of 6-year-old children, 20 of them, screaming loud, parents in the back. Nerve-wracking. Hardest audience I ever had.
How long did you, first of all, did you get paid for that?
I did. I made a whopping $16. I'll never forget, $15 plus a $1 tip.
Outstanding. And then how long, because I know that was the early part, we didn't talk about that much, was your performance, at least experience as a young person, was with magic, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I worked in my first nightclub at age 14, comedy and magic at the Playboy Club when I was 16 years old, which is the most unbelievable job for a 16-year-old
for a 16-year-old hormone raging young boy. It had to have been a beyond a thrill for you.
It was anyway. I've never heard it referred to as hormone raging. That's interesting. But no, I worked in nightclubs through high school and college. And when I got out of college, not sure what I was going to do, I saw a couple of motivational speakers, Zig Ziglar and Tom Hopkins, and I said, You know what? I can do that. And there's a whole background as to how I didn't even realize how much I love customer service till I started reading books thinking, wow, this is what my parents taught me. They told me to write a thank you note after I did that birthday party. They told me to call and say thank you. They told me to ask for feedback. And then there were moments which was like I can remember, an elderly woman pulling up to a gas station I worked at when I was in high school. And it was a very, very cold day. And I went out and I pumped her gas for her. And my manager yelled at me because he said, we're a self-service station. You don't do that. Now she's going to expect that every time. I go, well, maybe she'll come back every time instead of the station across the street in catty corner. I mean, I didn't know it was called customer service. I knew it was the right thing to do.
Sure.
So that's kind of how I got into this thing. Anyway, that's a long answer to the lightning round question.
No, it's a great answer. I know you play the guitar as well.
Do you have them in the background?
Where do you have an opportunity to scratch that itch to perform?
I actually am proud to say I play with Eric Clapton and the Allman Brothers on YouTube every night when I go home. And Carlos Santana. I love Santana. He and I are like this. I'm the guy over here on the far left.
Love it. What is your must-have do you take with you when you travel?
A toothbrush.
How about must have on the road?
Hotels. Must have. I've got to have my computer. I got to stay connected.
Absolutely. Good. 10 years from now, What are you going to do? Keep morphing, keep growing, doing something different?
Well, I hope I'm growing. My goal is, if you look at 10 years from now, I pretty much do what I want to do. I feel retirement is doing what you love to do. And if you think about that, I've been retired since my 20s. Now, there is a certain amount of minutia, paperwork, things like that. If I could just get rid of that, and hopefully I'll figure out how to do that in earlier than 10 years, then, life is grand. I want to create a saleable company, which means my training side of what I do is something that's able to be sold. And I just want to keep talking and writing until I become that little old man on the stage that's cute. I don't want to be that cute old man. I want to be the guy that's still dynamic and relevant.
You don't want to be the one who says, bless his heart, he's still at it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Listen, I love following you on, listen, not only we've been friends for a long time, but I love following you on social media, and I'm all about the family stuff. So tell me your proudest dad moment.
Wow. I'm going to tell you, there's so many of them. I wish I could tell you something about all three of my kids. So I will real quick. Recently, my 25-year-old daughter, who is now doing management work for Mumford & Sons in the entertainment industry. She's one of the managers that does special projects. I realize my 25-year-old is making decisions that impact other people's lives. Holy moly. My youngest daughter at age 23, she comes out of college, and how she's connecting and getting jobs and getting people interested, it blows my mind. She's mini me in that way. My son, who's currently 28, I'll never forget when he was much, much younger, might have been, 10 or 11 years old. We went to a hockey game. We always went early. We stood at the glass. We hoped a hockey player would throw a puck over and he'd catch it, and that would be his souvenir for the day. And one day, someone threw it over and he caught it, and he looked at a little kid next to him and he says, "Here, this is for you." And he gave it away. Dad. And I thought, well, yeah, why did you do that? He said, "Dad, I got one last game. He didn't get one." And how cool is that? So all three of my kids are absolutely amazing.
Isn't that the best? The best of the best. The newest book is The Convenience Revolution. My guest is Shep Hyken. For those of you watching, those of you listening, I appreciate you doing so. Be sure to subscribe. Hit the button below. I'm on C-Suite Radio. This is on iTunes, wherever. Check out some of the other people that we've interviewed. Some great conversations, some brilliant minds, some great people as well. And that's part of the criteria. Big thanks. If they're looking to get a hold of you, what's the website?
Hyken.com, HYKEN.com.
Hyken.com. Big thanks to my guest, Shep Hyken. We'll talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in again, and we'll talk to you next time on the Very Visible Business Podcast.
For past and future episodes, be sure to subscribe at theveryvisiblebusiness.com. You can also learn more about David Avrin's keynote speaking and consulting at visibilityinternational.com. Connect with us on social media and check out David Avrin's latest book, Visibility Marketing, at Amazon.com. This has been the Very Visible Business Podcast with David Avrin.